On privilege, my privilege, and lo, the great prophet Noel Plum, that's me by the way, did predict, he foretold one of your Earth weeks ago that this video would be forthcoming. And if that doesn't impress you, by the way, because you think, well, you said you were going to make the video, now you've made the video, not much of a prophecy there. There are plenty of examples in the fucking Bible of the same thing, of people setting out, deliberately, determinedly doing something to fulfill a prophecy that was made in the past. And Christians and other religious folk find that tremendously impressive, still in tremendously impressive acts of prophecy, even though people in the future deliberately did what they did to fulfill that prophecy. So if that's impressive, then this can be impressive also, I think. But anyway, enough with that. Let's get on with the video, which has nothing to do with that whatsoever. What it is to do with is the subject of privilege. And if you watched the first part of this, the precursor to this video, it was to ask you about your privilege, to consider your privilege before I kind of coloured your conceptions by telling you what I wanted to tell you on this. And recall, what I want to talk about isn't using privilege in the normal sense, this isn't about trying to make people feel guilty or to question how, from a social justice perspective, how they can make the world a better place or anything like that. This is from a positive perspective of thinking, what is it about my life? What is it about the luxuries that I have or the situation that I find myself in that is undoubtedly a privileged position in comparison to the vast majority of other people. And I don't want to go through the normal things of race and gender and sex and all that lot, right? The only one that I want to touch upon of the normal candidates, of the usual candidates, is sometimes called Western privilege or first world privilege, because that kind of impacts on what I'm going to talk about in the main. And of course, there's a whole variety of things that we can think of with regard to there. I regard myself as very privileged for being as healthy as I am. I've only had 2 days sickness in about 20 years at work, and I'm sure that that is in part as a result of the type of upbringing that I was able to have from living in this part of the world, from being well nourished, from being in a part of the world that even if you don't have a job, people will give you money to go out and clothe and feed your child. And that's a marvellous thing to benefit from, I think. And in terms of healthcare that's present at the moment in my part of the world, it's free at the point of need, which means that even if I lose my job, I might be contributing to it now, but even if I can't contribute to that, I can still reap the benefits of that if something terrible was to happen to me, if I was to fall ill or injure myself in some way, shape or form. So those are privileges of the society in which I live. But they're a little bit boring, really, aren't they? What I want to talk about is something that I find a lot more interesting and something that I dwell on more and more, really, as time goes by. And that is privilege, not looking at the context that we normally look at, although, as I say, that kind of Western first world thing will fit into it. Well, looking at a kind of temporal privilege, which is the privilege of living in the here and now, as opposed to living 100 years ago, or 200 years ago, or 500 years ago. Because in many respects, for the vast majority, most of the privileges that I have from living in the part of the world that I live in, and for having the kind of experiences that I can have, I could only have in the here and now, potentially in the future as well, but only in the here and now. 100 years ago, 200 years ago, unless I was one of the very, very small people who were very wealthy, I wouldn't have anything even approaching the privileges that I have now. And some of the privileges that I have now, nobody had that far back. So that's very interesting. So there's a group of privileges that we have as a result of where we live and the societies that we live in, but also in terms of the time that we live in. And I think that the time that we live in is a very, very special time for a great number of us, especially in the societies that I live in. Which is that, for a start, there are a number of experiences that you can have that you simply could never have had in the past, and those are experiences such as if you just go back to my father, who's now in his late 70s. He said to me about the fact that when he first got married, they had money to buy some kind of white goods, but they didn't have the kind of disposable income. Even though he went out to work, they didn't have the disposable income that people generally have nowadays, that they accept as the norm. But then there weren't as many things to spend your money on. Sure, if you wanted to spend your money on luxury goods and fantastic jewellery and things like that, there were things to spend your money on. You could soon buy a bigger house, but there weren't the array of things that we have now. I mean, nowadays, if all you had was let's say a refrigerator and a radio, people and some kind of a twin tub washing machine, people regard you as in abject poverty. Everybody is expected, even those that are poor, are expected to have a vast number of greater things than that. They're expected to have a television, maybe a couple of televisions, at least a television perhaps in the children's room, and a television in the main family room. They're expected to have a microwave oven. They're expected to have a DVD player. They're expected to have some kind of computer access, whether in the home or the ability to go down the local library or something like that and to be able to use a computer. And these are things that these things simply didn't exist if you go back more than a couple of decades. Some of these things didn't even fucking exist. And now our expectations are not only that these things are aspirational, but for the vast majority of us living in the first world, these things are things that we expect to have without being fabulously rich, without even being middle class. So these are working class expectations, not aspirations. I think that is a fantastic privilege, not just about where we live, but when we live. And also the way that we can access information allows us to enjoy some of the other aspects that are very, very special about this time in which we live. And those are things related to science and technology. Truly, we are living in an unprecedented age, certainly in terms of the past, which is kind of what unprecedented means. Perhaps it will be mirrored or perhaps bettered in the future. But the pace of change of both technology and of science is absolutely fantastic. If you went back a few hundred years, then there would be an expectation, if you lived for 60 or 70 years, that there would truly be things that we understood about the world by the time that you died that we didn't understand about the world at the time when you were born. But it was really slow progress. It maybe didn't seem so at the time, but considering the way things change now, considering the fact that when I was a teenager, I didn't have a mobile phone. Mobile phones were just coming in and they were the size of a bath, right? And nowadays, a mobile phone just isn't just about making phone calls. A mobile phone we expect to do like 1,001 different things. It's like some kind of fabulous multi-tool from the future. And it's tiny and the fucking battery lasts for days. And it's just absolutely amazing. And it's so amazing, and yet we take it for granted. And we expect next year's phone is going to be significantly better than this year's phone. Otherwise, there's going to be fucking trouble. And what a fantastic era to live in, that we can, and that we're so privileged by that we don't even think about it. We just accept that there is this pace of change. There are these fantastic things that happen in science that we can think about, that they're building the Large Hadron Collider, that we're going to have a chance to find the Higgs boson. Oh, we found the Higgs boson. What's the next thing then? And all these things can happen within a single lifespan. For me, some of that privilege is gradually eroding. Maybe that's why I think about it a little bit more, is that when I read about missions, about, for example, potential missions to Mars, whereas when I was a child, the expectation always was that, well, these things will happen. If they're planning them and talking about them, they will happen within my expected lifetime. Now I'm starting to do a bit of a calculation. The Chinese have said it might be, they hope to have a mission to Mars by 2060, and I'm thinking 2060, that's another 45 years. That makes me about 88. We're starting to get to that point where I'm having to cross my fingers with some of these things and think maybe I will never see these things come to fruition. But at least there are all these things happening and we get the chance to enjoy them all. And I think that's fantastic. And the beauty of all these things is that you do not need to be rich. Another example of just this kind of thing, there's a game coming out this year. It might be a success, it might be a flop. I don't know. It is called, if you haven't heard of it, it is called No Man's Sky. It involves a procedurally generated universe that every player will play in, but it's so fantastically large that you might not even ever meet another player. It involves several quintillion solar systems, which is a number so large that something like if you as an individual player was to visit a different solar system every second, the sun would have turned into a red giant and the earth will have boiled away before you've managed to visit every one. So you will visit worlds, procedurally generated worlds within this universe, that even though every other player is playing in the same universe, the chances are that nobody else will ever visit that particular solar system. And every life form, every tree, every plant, every type of animal of every description is procedurally generated and potentially unique. And every atmosphere and every aspect of it is potentially unique. And truly, if you look at the trailers, this is not to prejudge the game, it might turn out to be a lame duck, but it just sounds such a fantastic thing. When you look at the trailers and you look at the diversity of landscapes and life forms, it truly does look at a fantastic place to be able to go out there and explore. And you can fly around seamlessly, going from planet to different solar systems to other planets, and explore planets that apparently the surface area is akin to what you would expect an actual fucking planet to be. So even if somebody else is on the same planet as you, you may never ever get to see them. I found that really amazing. At the same time, there are half a dozen developers developing high-definition virtual reality headsets that are going to revolutionize the way that we can experience the virtual world, that will respond at the speed that you can move your head so they won't make you feel motion sick, that will give you a proper 3D view, wide view, and be able to allow you to experience these kinds of worlds the way that you would really like to be able to experience them. And you will be able to buy those headsets at less than it would cost you to buy one of the new Xboxes or one of the new PlayStation 4s. So you have a game that is going to be priced at the kind of prices games are priced at, a headset that's less than the price of a console. These are things that nobody in any part of the world has ever experienced anything like in the history of the world, and yet these are things which are economically within the reach in my part of the world of the majority of people. The scientific discoveries that I talked about, it might be rich man's money to be able to take part in these things or to fund these things, and the business of governments rather than individuals, but all you need is access to a library or access to the internet, and you can experience and you can indulge yourself in these things. These are not rich man's things. These are not things that are just for the few. These are privileges, fantastic privileges that people in other times never got the chance to experience, that we can all experience. And I just think that this is a marvellously privileged period in history with which to live, with there being so much change, with there being so many experiences that we can have, and whole qualitative types of experience, such as virtual worlds, that nobody else has ever had the chance to experience. For me, that is my privilege. That is the privilege of my position that I appreciate more than perhaps some of these other things. That's what I've got to bring to this conversation. Anybody else who's made any responses from the previous video, I'll list them at the bottom of this video if there's had any. Have a look, see what everybody else has to say. Have a think about it for yourself if you haven't. I hope you found this video interesting. If nothing else, thank you for watching, and bye for now.